If you've been using AI large language models to create content, you've probably run into this frustrating scenario. You get a draft and it's okay, but not quite what you want, and you start to try to fix it with the AI model, and it starts inserting problems that weren't there in the previous draft, and pretty soon you're going in circles playing whack-a-mole where one problem is fixed, another one pops up, and sometimes it'll rewrite the entire thing in a way that you don't like, and it'll make you want to pull your hair out and wonder if you will ever get something usable from it. And if this sounds familiar, if this sounds like you, then you are not alone, and that's exactly what we're going to cover in this video today. The key to breaking out of this vicious cycle is knowing how to give the AI specific feedback to fix only the problems that you want fixed and leave the rest, so you're constantly moving forward and creating a better and better draft as you go. Here's how we're going to address this: by looking at ways to automatically edit your AI copy, starting from large edits to smaller edits. Starting with the big picture, are you going in the right direction? What is your harshest critic going to say? Is there any edits that might help with that? Then moving into fact checking, so reducing hallucinations, maybe pulling in some additional facts with tools like Perplexity. From there, we're going to look at the structure. Is it just a boring, vanilla 5-paragraph essay? What can we do to make it look like a more sophisticated, knowledgeable resource? And also looking at different ways that potentially it could be rearranged to be more logical or easier to read to keep your audience's attention. Then getting into line editing, specific words, and different things like that. That can have a lot to do with the final tone. And finally, looking at ways to prevent unintended plagiarism. There are a lot of things in these large language models. You want to make sure to protect yourself if there is something in there that might already be out on the internet. You don't want to risk that. So that's a very important step. I'm jumping into the cheat sheet here. There is a ton in this cheat sheet. As you may know, I create one of these for each of my videos. These are all available instantly to my Patreon supporters. So there is a link in the description of this video to this cheat sheet. And if you do decide to support me on Patreon, you get instant access to this and all of the others that folks describe as recipe books, where they're taking and copying and pasting all these different prompts in ways that really hyper-personalize their experience with these large language models, and they're able to get a lot more value out of the large language models. So we're not going to go through all of these prompts, but we are going to look at a few examples here, starting with this harsh critic. So sometimes you're working on a piece of content, you're maybe highly caffeinated like I am, you get real excited about it, but you realize in the end, after you go to publish it, that you were way off the mark, and that's really not where your audience's head is at, and you were kind of down a rabbit hole. So that is one of the first things that I like to check, is just see, play the role of a harsh critic in my audience. What are they going to say about this piece behind my back? I want to know that first and foremost, and that will probably inform all of the future edits that I do. So I've got an example pulled up here of a draft I'm creating called Surreal Relativity, Dali and Einstein's Unconventional Perspectives. And this video you're watching is the third part of a 3-part series on content creation. I created this in the previous video, all about creating great first drafts. I used a prompt that takes two different ideas and connects them. So in this case, it was Einstein's theory of relativity and some work by Salvador Dali, specifically the persistence of memory, and tries to compare these two things and find ways that they are connected to one another. Here's the prompt that I used for that in Gemini. This created a pretty cool outline, although the structure wasn't amazing. The points were pretty good. So I copied and pasted this into Claude and asked Claude to create the draft. I think Claude is a much better writer than many of the other tools. It created a first draft that was interesting and readable, but it fell into that typical 5-paragraph essay situation that I covered in the last video. There's a bunch of prompts in that last video on creating good first drafts that help you break out of that mold of that 5-paragraph essay. So I went ahead and used one of those here. I said this structure feels a little generic. Can you rewrite it to follow the style of what might be found in The Economist or similar publications? And that gets us to this draft, which I think is interesting. And we're going to start here and try this harsh critic prompt. So I've said, please play the role of a harsh critic, analyze this and relentlessly point out its flaws, focus on lack of originality, repetitive statements, weaknesses in argumentation. And this will throw some cold water on any excitement you have about your article, but I think it is a good way to strengthen your piece. So from here, I'm just going to ask Claude, how can we address these? These are pretty good pointers. I'm just going to ask it to update the draft according to these. You could probably go one by one and it would be stronger, but again, you might run into that aspect of having it overwrite previous drafts that were good. So one way around that would be to really specifically tell it which parts to update, and we'll get into some examples of that shortly. This is feeling pretty good. This is definitely stronger than the previous version. There are a bunch of prompts in here for playing the harsh critic. There's the devil's advocate prompt, contesting assumptions, audience perception is another version of this. Now we're going to get into reducing hallucinations. So I'm going to take this entire blog article and put it into Perplexity and ask Perplexity to fact check everything here. So I'm copying and pasting that prompt right into Perplexity, and let's see what it says. It's basically saying that it is error-free to some degree. It has some qualms about our interpretations of certain quotes, but I think having these citations could be pretty interesting. Let's see if we can get Claude to add citations to this draft. So I'm just saying, here are some citations. Can you please return this draft verbatim, only adding citations where they are appropriate? All right, so you can see it has returned that draft with citations to the specific links that are included in the Perplexity reply. Sometimes Perplexity hides those links. They're here, but when you copy and paste it, it shows up as well. Let me show you an example of that. Here are all the citations from what Perplexity returns. All I had to do, copy this clipboard and paste that into a Google Doc to see these. If I were to do this over, I might put in this prompt, please include the citations at the end of your response. So it just includes them here. So I really like what it says here. To bolster the argument, the author could incorporate more specific evidence from both painting and theory, including quotes from art critics, historians, etc., discussing the significance of the persistence of memory or specific passages from Einstein. I'm going to grab this and drop this into Perplexity and see if we can actually update this with even more information. So I've updated that slightly from what Claude suggested, just looking for some ways to improve this with quotes. And it has pulled together a few interesting things here. I'm going to copy this to the clipboard. I'm going to drop this back into Claude. So I'm just saying, please update this draft with some additional info here. Please make sure to cite any sources and include those citation links at the bottom of the draft. You can see it including the citations here. And there you go. Now we are really cooking with gas. This is quite a piece with tons and tons of references to strengthen it. And it has gone through the harsh critic test. It has gone through the fact-checking test. And we've even added some more information. There are more citations here than most articles, so maybe that's overkill. But we are now far from a generic 5-paragraph essay with flimsy facts. We've got something here that really feels like it could be in The Economist. The next steps here are looking into developmental editing, so analyzing it for overall coherence. There are a bunch of prompts in the cheat sheet for that. If it's fictional, analyze it from a character and plot development standpoint. I left this one in here even though I know a lot of folks are B2B content marketers, but this can be very helpful to think about your content marketing as, a piece of fiction, making sure there's a good tension, that there might be a twist in there somewhere that's unexpected, that, your characters are motivated, your audience might be the character, or the different things mentioned in there might be different characters that are working through a plot. I think it's very helpful to look at any sort of writing through that lens. Now getting into structural editing. I'm not going to demo all of these, but we'll pick a few more here. This one looks good. Evaluate paragraph effectiveness. So are there any paragraphs that seem too long, too short, or out of place? But these are ways now we've looked at the big picture. Now we're getting more and more granular as we go. So I'm going to copy this in. Other prompts that fit into the structure category might be just looking for logical coherence, looking for overlap. Sometimes if you're copying and pasting multiple things together, there might be places where you're mentioning the same thing over and over. You want to edit for that. You want to look and see if it can be rearranged in various ways. So this is pulling up a few different parts, a few different paragraphs that feel a little bit long. These are the steps that an editor would take you through, kind of looking at it from a big picture, now getting more granular into paragraph level. And we'll just continue through this as we get down into the copy editing. So this, scan for subject-verb agreement, comma splices, run-on sentences, jargon, titles, cliches. I like this one. Identify cliches, overly used words. This can get the AI to catch itself because, it uses a lot of funky words that it over and over that are sort of a dead giveaway that it's an AI-generated content. Let's see what it pulls up when I drop this in. Exactly. It has done a great job kind of looking at things that, at first glance being used twice. You want to make sure, it would be an improvement to fix that. Grapple with profound mysteries. Yeah, that's something that can jump out at you as, being a little bit like BS, frankly. Other things here, parallel, you might want to look at that and edit that. Relativity is specific to the article, so I think that's okay. So you want to just use your gut and go through these in a way that a true editor where, you don't have to take all of them and act on all of them. That's where the human interaction comes in. But this now going from the paragraph level to the line level, there's a couple things that jumped out at me. I was hoping it would catch that in conclusion at the end. That would be something I would for sure manually edit, as I'm really getting sick of these AI models just giving you the generic intro, the generic 3 paragraphs, and then that conclusion. So anything that's a dead giveaway of like in conclusion, that type of language, I would edit out. It didn't catch it here, but something you can do manually. Keep an eye out for. Line editing, you can do the same thing just on a sentence by sentence level. Choppy sentence, proofreading would be basically the final step of this editing process. So making sure there's no typos or basic errors. I've been using it a ton for this. I love it way more than Grammarly for proofreading, because as Grammarly oftentimes will insert problems into my drafts. Claude specifically is good at saying, hey, no, you're good. This draft looks good. And I do that as much as I can, and it has really helped me reduce typos and errors, although they do sneak through sometimes. If you've been paying a lot of attention to my videos, you will see some popping up, but getting better all the time. So now we've moved from these big picture edits all the way to line editing, and finally what we want to look for is unintended plagiarism. As these large language models are trained on so much data, there is a chance that it will create something that already is out there and can put you on the hook for, copyright infringement or just make you look bad, I guess, especially if you're working with clients, if you're creating content for clients. This is a biggie. This is what Grammarly is good for. So checking grammar, I don't really use Grammarly for that anymore, but I do like it for its plagiarism check. Turnitin is another one that you can just pump these through and say, hey, is there any overlap between what I've got here and what is out there in the world? So I've dropped it all into Grammarly, and you can see all the different things that Grammarly is picking up on that are actually not problems. This was all written straight from AI. I think that is evidence that, Claude, these large language models, can really outperform Grammarly when it comes to those typos. But what we need it for, way down here at the bottom, is this plagiarism check. Let's see if there's any plagiarism. There are some quotes in here, so it might pull those in. Let's see what we got. So yeah, it says that there is only this plagiarism has been detected, but this is actually the name of a citation. So I'm not worried about that at all. That's what I was expecting it might return. Awesome. So there is a ton more in this cheat sheet, and this closes out the 3-part content creation playlist that I've been building out, starting with looking at great source material, creating great first drafts, and now into these 7 levels of editing that will really help you get smart about how you're telling it to alter your drafts, how you're telling it to improve your drafts. I really appreciate you watching. Again, if you're getting something out of these videos, consider jumping in, helping out, helping support the mission by joining Patreon, getting immediate access to over 70 cheat sheets, and tons more coming every week. There's also custom GPTs in there and some code stuff. I also have some coaching options. I have some one-on-one coaching options and some really fun meetings Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. A good group of people join in, asking me questions. We're all learning from each other. So check that out. Consider that. And I will see you on the next video.
Make your dreams come true. True.